Who's the good boy? Do you have your little man? Is that your little man? Can you wag your tail? Can you wag your tail? No, you can't wag your tail. I'm sorry, did I interrupt your nap time? Okay, I'm gonna go make a card. I love you. You take a nap. Yes. Hi, this is Jenna with Brown Dog Craft Company, and today we're making two Under the Sea cards, both very different from each other. So the first is going to be using some Distress Oxide with some ink blending, and the second is going to be using some patterned paper and some fun die cuts. So the ink blended one is technically a one-layer card. So here I have an A2 panel of Neenah Classic Crest cardstock. So it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm going to blend 3 blues onto the panel. So I'm going to start with my lightest, which is Salvage Patina, and ink up about 1/3 of the cardstock with that. And then I'll start with the medium shade, which is going to be Mermaid Lagoon, and I'll blend in the middle with that, and then I'll go back with my Salvage Patina brush and smooth out the transition a little bit between the two. And then the third darkest color is going to be Uncharted Mariner. So I'll flip my panel around and use some Post-it tape to help hold my panel down and avoid getting any fingerprints in the oxide ink while it's still wet. So this darkest color here, the Uncharted Mariner, I will deepen up a little bit when I'm all done with some black soot. And I'll just take a little bit, you don't need much, and just blend it around the edges down toward the bottom there, and then blend the Uncharted Mariner back into it. So it gives us a really good deep sea vibe. Now, Distress Oxide ink is water reactive. So here I am, I'm going to take my Distress sprayer, spray a little bit of water on the panel, soak up the excess with my towel. And here you can see it lifted the color a little bit, and that's going to give you, that's oxidation from the water and the ink reacting together. So it looks a lot like bubbles that you'd find underwater. So here I'm taking a coral stamp along with some seaweed stamps, and I'm stamping them in various shades. So Peacock, Oceanside, and Midnight from Concord and Ninth. So just stamping those along the bottom and making sure that I hang some off the edge of the card so there's some continuity to the card. Now here, the panel's dried. I've let it dry for about ½ an hour, and I've picked out some sentiments. I'm going to use my anti-static tool on the card panel, and I will use my Simon Says Stamp embossing and watermark ink to ink up my sentiments. So the sentiments are going to be, "You are unique and completely amazing. Happy birthday to my beautiful friend." So I'll stamp those 2 or 3 times to make sure I get good coverage. When you're stamping a sentiment, you want to make sure to not press too hard on your stamp and instead stamp multiple times to get good coverage. So once I feel like there's good enough coverage on the panel, I will peel that out of my MISTI, and I'm going to use Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail White Embossing Powder. And I'll sprinkle that over the embossed part where I stamped the sentiments for embossing, and then I'll use my heat tool to melt the powder. I made sure to heat up my heat tool so it was really hot before I brought it to the panel, so that would minimize the warping. Heated a little bit on the back too to help the warping. Now for some of the finishing parts, I'm going to add a jellyfish in the top right. The jellyfish is going to be in Tide Pool ink from Concord and Ninth, so that he sort of blends into the background more towards the surface of the water. And then I'm going to take a seahorse and stamp the seahorse toward the bottom left, right next to the sentiment there. So he sort of nestles into the sentiment. Now he's a red rubber mount stamp, so I take out the mouse pad insert from the MISTI since the stamp already has the foam on it. so you don't need that little insert. So I'll stamp him in some peacock. These red rubber stamps stamp really well, usually on the first impression. So just stamp him once. Now I'm going to take some schools of fish and I'll position them on the card, and I want them to be in the background. So I want them to look like they're behind the images, but I didn't actually want to have to mask anything. So instead of stamping them in a color, I'm going to take my Simon Says Stamp embossing and watermark ink and just ink them up with that and push them down on the panel. And it gives you a really light impression and makes them look like they're in the background, sort of swimming somewhere in the ocean back there. So, and I'll do the same thing with a little sea turtle and a little fish that I think in the end you can't really see them like you can the schools of fish, but so the seahorse is from a Stampin' Up! Set, and all of the other images, the jellyfish and these little fish, are from a Hero Arts, my monthly hero from last summer. That when I checked right before this video, they were still available for purchase. So here I'm taking a Lawn Fawn rectangle, stitched rectangle die, the large rectangle stackables, and I'm just going to line that up and run that through my die cut machine, and it gives you a nice stitching detail. I added that to a Hero Arts Paradise, I believe, is the cardstock card base. And in the finished photo, you'll see it has some sky blue pearls from Pretty Pink Posh. I didn't film that for some reason, so you'll see the pearls in the finished video. All right, now on to card 2. You can see I've already I've already stamped and die cut some images. They're from a Stampin' Up! Set. And here I am, I'm going to show you, I'll stamp and die cut a few more. So I'm using new inks from Concord and Ninth. I'm using Sorbet, Nectar, I believe I have Sea Glass in there, Peacock, Oceanside. So I stamped everything out with the Misty. And then I'll die cut out these images also. Now here's some pattern paper from Stampin' Up! I believe it's called By the Bay. I'm going to use those two pattern papers there. I thought that those shells looked a lot like Sea Glass and Nectar from Concord and Ninth. So I thought it would be perfect for the images on this card. So here I am taking the same rectangle die with the stitching from Lawn Fawn, and I will cut that out. That's going to be my card base. And then I used the scallop frames from Lawn Fawn to cut out a frame from the weathered wood pattern paper with that front little detail is in Nectar, Concord and Ninth cardstock. And I'm going to arrange the die cuts within that little scallop circle. So before I do that, I'm going to take some Pebble ink, and there was like this little sand detail stamp in the stamp set, so I'm just going to randomly stamp that over the background. I'll make sure I hang some of it off the edge, and I'll make sure that I twist and turn the stamp so that it's not the exact same looking image all over the panel. That looks good. So here I'm going to pop most of the items up on foam tape. So I'll position the first sand dollar, which I hadn't seen or thought of a sand dollar in a couple of decades. And I pulled out this set and I was like, oh my gosh, that's a sand dollar. I have to use it. It's just, I'm sure people who live by the ocean think of them or see them all the time, but we don't have them in the lakes where I live, so they're fun to use. So here I'll position some of the seaweed and a starfish and one of the shells. And so I'm gluing what's going to go directly onto the background. I'm gluing that down now. And then I'm going to take some foam tape and pop up the scallop circle, like the pink, the nectar. I'll pop up that with some small foam squares. So I just sort of position them, you know, every third or fourth scallop here. And then I will add some more in wherever it needs more support. But I'm trying to avoid where I'm trying to avoid putting foam tape on the scallop where I popped up the sand dollars, since the sand dollars already have foam tape underneath them. So I'll line this up and place it down, and then add little bits of foam tape wherever it's needed. You can always take your scissors and cut those foam squares even smaller than what they are. But one of these foam squares fits perfectly behind one of those little scallop circles. So that looks pretty good. Maybe one more back here. It wants to stick to my fingers. And then I'll add the starfish right in front of the sand dollars there. And then last but not least, I'll figure out where to put that little seashell. I couldn't decide where it looked best, but I didn't want to cover up too much of that weathered wood background. There's just a little bit peeking out, so I end up putting the seashell down next to the starfish there. I'll just glue him directly onto the card, or directly onto the scallop circle. Now I pulled out some sentiments. The one on the top is friends are like seashells, you collect them along the way. So I took a small stitched rectangle and die cut that out with the weathered wood, and I'm going to heat emboss. So here I am with my anti-static powder tool, and I will use my embossing and watermark ink again to stamp down the sentiment, and then I will heat emboss this in Simon Says Stamp Antique Gold embossing powder. It's my favorite gold embossing powder. It has maybe sort of a more vintage look or a more weathered look than regular gold or gold sparkle. So I'd say I'd probably use this embossing powder and my white embossing powder the most. So this is actually my second time doing this. I did do it once, and when I stamped it in the MISTI, it shifted and it double stamped. So this is attempt number 2, which works out. And I'll put that up in the upper left. I'll add some foam tape. Here I've got my large roll of Altenew double-sided foam tape, and I really love this because, well, one, you can pick your own size of foam tape when you take it off the roll. You just cut it to whatever size you'd like. And 2, I really like it because the back releases so easily. There's no fighting with the backer on the Altenew foam tape. So I think that looks really good. I'll pull out the MISTI again, and I found in the stamp set there's a sentiment that says something along the lines of wishing you the very best, but somehow I lost it. Yeah, here I am looking for it, and I have literally no idea where it went. I've cleaned up my entire space since I made this card, and the stamp is still missing. So I'm sure it will turn up somewhere along the way, somewhere where I least expect it. But thankfully, in this stamp set, there are 2 of the same size stamps for sentiments, and the second one that's left that I did not lose says, "I'm so happy I found you." So it probably goes better with the sentiment anyway. Friends are like seashells, you collect them along the way. I'm so happy I found you. It probably goes better. So maybe it was meant to be. But we'll never know. So here I have a scrap of that weathered wood cardstock, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So anti-static powder tool, stamp with clear embossing ink, and heat emboss with antique gold embossing powder. And then I will die cut that out using my sentiment label dies from Simon Says Stamp. I use those dies so much I don't even put them away. They just sit right next to my die cut machine here on my desk. So here, dip that in the embossing powder. There is a little spoon in there somewhere, but this works too. I just use my finger on the back to tap off some of the excess embossing powder before I heat set it. So here I've popped up the sentiment, both sentiments, and then a starfish next to the secondary sentiment down on the bottom. And here I'm going to add some Concord and Ninth enamel dots in a light pink color and a light green color. So I will scatter those around the card wherever I think they look good. I'd say I added 3 sets of the pink and 2 sets of the light green. Excuse me. And then to finish off the card, I'm going to take my glossy accents and I will add that to both of the starfish. So this will dry clear. It goes on cloudy, but it dries clear and it has a shiny finish. So just adds a little something to the card. So those are the 2 cards I have for you today. I hope you like both of them. Like I said, they're both under the sea or sea cards, but very different. So a little bit of everything went into making these, except for hot foiling. I didn't do any hot foiling today, but I feel like I pulled every craft supply I own out and put it on my desk. So some days it feels like that. So here's the finished card. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed these 2 cards. If you'd like to see more content, please like and subscribe. And I listed all of my supplies that I used out on my blog for easy reference, browndogcraftcompany.com. So please visit in your convenience, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.